Before the food guide pyramid, the average saturated fat intake was around 15%. The average saturated fat intake right now is around 11. 15 to 11, we have more heart disease, we are totally overweight, out of shape. 1/3 of our children are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. It's not a saturated fat issue.
People still say this red meat equals cancer, colon cancer specifically. Where does that science come from?
Bradley Johnston, there was a series of papers in Annals of Internal Medicine, and what he found was that there was no increased risk in eating red meat and heart disease and cancer.
What's your take on essential amino acid supplements?
Okay, this is an important one because the reality is that...
Hi, I'm Dr. Will Cole. Wellness is a sacred art, and you are the masterpiece. This is the art of being well. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, my friend, welcome to the podcast.
This has been a good year for us. We've gotten to see each other so much more this year than we have in, the last 6 years. It's been awesome.
I thought the same thing in preparation for conversation. I saw you in Vegas, saw you in Australia. We flew on the same plane together.
It was awesome.
From where we were at Brisbane to San Francisco, I think it was. God's just synchronicity, man. Just throughout the year. I wanted to say two things on the outset. Just kicking this off. I have been so proud of you and the work that you're doing, cheering you on from the sidelines, just seeing how God has used you over the past years has been truly, as your friend, just so special to see. And secondly, I want to say, despite all of that amazing success and busyness, you're one of the few people in my life that consistently check in on me and ask me how I'm doing. Just thank you. Thank you for that.
That means a lot. Thanks. Thanks for noticing. I appreciate it.
You're a good friend. I mean, honestly, we don't even live in the same city. I can't imagine. You have so much to give people personally and publicly.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I value. I think one of the things that becomes important I don't even know if it's as we age, but as we go through life, that we become really anchored into what our values are, and that they're not just these random obscure values, but that we act on them. And relationships and friendships and non-transactional relationships are what means the most to me. And the people that know me would attest to that being true.
Amen to that. So let's kick it off here. I mean, because this is kind of hot off the press. The new dietary guidelines for Americans have come out recently. The HHS and USDA literally flipped the food pyramid upside down. I mean, you and I had talked off the record over the past couple of months of we knew it was coming out, we knew the details. And I mean, you were on stage when they announced the new dietary guidelines. So can you give us kind of a behind the scenes of what came about this and this conversation around protein for the first time ever, the United States government increasing the protein. So what's the tea on the protein and the dietary guidelines?
Now, the first thing that I have to say is it was just this moment. First of all, health should not be political. People get very upset.
Yes.
So, you're this or that, but health is bipartisan. Health should be available to all. And us as clinicians, I can speak for myself, it's not political. And we have to really put our bias beside, just let them go, so that we can focus what is really most valuable, which is the health of Americans and the health of our world, frankly. So I have been studying protein metabolism since, the early to 1999 for a really long time. And I just happened to have been mentored by one of the world-leading protein experts, this guy named Don Layman. He's a professor emeritus. He's won Lifetime Achievement Awards. He has published over 100 papers, really extraordinary, a very extraordinary thinker. And much of the research that we know about protein as it relates to translational knowledge, meaning there's the mechanistic stuff about muscle protein synthesis and mTOR, and then there's what is the science that actually informs, what you and I do? What is the science that we begin to think about taking from randomized controlled trials and then putting into practice? And much of the guidelines, it's reflective of his research.
Mhm.
Why is this incredible? Because again, this is not a just hot off the press or hot off the cuff scientist of 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. This is a 40 plus year scientific expert. And I couldn't have been more proud of just, it was a moment I don't think I've ever had a moment like that in my entire life. I was on stage and I was holding back tears. So for me, it's been a very personal journey. And listen, you're so kind as we're friends to let me just talk. But I want to say
Yeah.
one other thing is that the best scientists in the world, for the most part, they're not really socially out there. They are, I hate to say this, maybe a little bit nerdy or not. I mean, they're not, you don't become the best in the world at what you do because you're partying and you're out there socializing. You're typically spending 10 plus hours reading and researching, and he's one of those career scientists. And so socially, I mean, I would meet him in DC and I would have lunch with someone and I'd be like, oh, and Don Layman,
Yeah.
smiling.
That's how I met Don, was through you
Exactly.
at a lunch. Well, yeah.
And I was probably there parading him around where he would just not want to say anything or talk to anyone, not because he didn't care about it, because just not his skill set. And frankly, that's one of the biggest gaps that we see, is that there's a lot of great scientists whose name you will never know, whose work you will never know, even if their work informed much of the other literature that we see. And so I was very proud to be there. And it was a moment where, I feel like it's my dharma. This is the job that I'm meant to do. It was just so
Yeah. And you've done so much to progress his research. I mean,
cool.
I don't know if you would say this. I would say this about you, is that the world is talking about protein and you see protein everywhere. I would say largely because of you, again, popularizing this amazing body of research such as Don. Do you sit back and look at that? Because this is the zeitgeist caused by your voice.
I think that, it's, I am sure that I helped and I played a role. It has been a collective effort for all of us, I really think. But I have spent the better part of the last 20 years beating
Yeah.
on this. And I'll never forget. I remember I went to I think it was at Berkeley, and it was when fasting was coming out. So this was probably 10 years ago. And you have to understand, I did my training in protein metabolism. I did a fellowship in geriatrics, and they literally laughed in my face. And they were so rude. And they were basically like, "Are you an idiot? We're eating enough dietary protein. Americans are fine," or whatever they were saying. And it was such. I mean, like their goal was to humiliate me. And I just thought, I'm like, these guys are wrong. They're totally wrong. And it's really come a long way. And what's so
Mhm.
incredible about the protein story is that finally it's being recognized in the country as the most important macronutrient that there is, especially with aging. And listen, people have a lot of opinions on the food guide pyramid. One of the things that people don't recognize is that the food guide pyramid, or these guidelines, they're not designed to give you hard, fast rules. And I've seen a lot of discussion around them. But again, this is something that I've been studying and working with Don on for the better part of 20 years. And the guidelines are designed to inform choices. They are designed to give us a range of choices. So when the information around protein comes out, the RDA has nothing to do with the guidelines. And you and I have talked about this before. It's the minimum protein recommendation to prevent deficiencies. That number hasn't changed. So the RDAs have not changed. What has changed is our recommendation of what is the protein number that should support health, because zero point 0.8 grams per kg has always been there, and there really hasn't been a protein recommendation, and certainly not an animal-based protein recommendation. And based on that, that's how we have to frame the conversation. And I hope that helps your listeners,
Yeah,
because
it does.
yeah,
I want to, yeah, and I want to just say this too before I forget. The first time you and I actually met, I don't know if you remember this. This is has to be like 10 years ago. So when people think, "Oh, it's a trend," is the trend. We were in a small hotel room in Park City, Utah, and Dr. Carrie Diulis, this amazing orthopedic surgeon, introduced me to this
Oh my God.
brilliant physician. Do
Yeah.
you remember that?
Yes. That is
And
so funny. And she actually is has been a long time vegan.
yeah,
I
totally.
remember that.
And she brought us together. I talked about functional medicine, and you talked about protein metabolism to a group of orthopedic surgeons at a hotel for continuing education credits. So, for people to know, this has been your work through and through, whether the world's paying attention or not. They just happen to be finally paying attention. So, I mean, was that a hard, I don't want to use the word sell for the dietary guidelines for them? Was there pushback to have a bigger conversation around proteins?
I wasn't on the committee, but what I can say about what I visually see from the outside is that there was a determination what was important. So the guidelines, when we look at the guidelines, it has a section on protein, has a section on saturated fat, has a section on processed foods. And what I can say about the protein section of that is that it's based in evidence. And I really appreciate this administration for focusing on what is the high quality evidence and what, based on the evidence, can we support? Which, frankly, is why I think that the 10% saturated fat guidelines didn't change.
Yeah.
You wrote a great book on a ketotarian diet, which is this is probably even before I knew you. Was that even before I knew you? I'd been watching.
Maybe right around the same time.
It's really
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. And so when we look at the guidelines, the protein guidelines, they now recommend, which is first and foremost, eat real foods and then increase protein from 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kg. This is supported in the literature. Some criticisms that you might hear is that, well, Americans are already eating enough protein. How do we determine that? We determine that based on something what we call the NHANES data set. So it's this large consensus data set. And the average American is eating 1.1 gram per kg, which means 50% of people are below that. And when we begin to reorient towards making a healthier America, the way that we have to do that is we really do have to focus on muscle health, not on weight loss, but really muscle health. And when you prioritize protein, it feeds muscle. It helps with body composition. It is an essential nutrient. People are not going to not get enough essential fatty acids. I mean, that doesn't
Hmm.
really happen unless you have some kind of absorption issue. It's ubiquitous in our diet. It's going to happen. But could you, and this is very hard to prove in randomized controlled trials, could you eat a less than optimal protein diet over a lifetime? And what is the result of that? Is it sarcopenia? Is it poor wound healing? What does that look like? Is it unhealthy skeletal muscle? And I say this because calories in the guidelines, calories come first, looking at calories, and then protein. And again, people will say the guidelines don't matter because no one follows that. Have you heard that?
Oh yeah, that was going to my follow up question is what do you say to the people who say the food pyramid or dietary guidelines don't matter? Nobody follows it anyways.
Do you remember when Time Magazine came out with the frowning egg face?
Yes. Yeah.
And so it was the frowning egg face, uh,
Cholesterol.
the food guide. I mean, everyone freaked out. The food guide pyramid. Cholesterol, the average cholesterol intake was around 700 milligrams per day. There was this perception that if we could reduce cholesterol to less than 200, roughly, heart disease would be eradicated. What happened? 10% saturated fat rule came out. Animal products were demonized. You couldn't go into your doctor's office, and you still can't, where they say, red meat is bad for cholesterol. You shouldn't be eating red meat. What about eggs? Eggs are bad for cholesterol. You shouldn't be eating eggs. We have heard that for the last, I don't know, at least the last 20 years,
Hmm.
40 years. This is what we've
Yeah,
heard.
40 years.
To say,
Hmm.
and this was informed by the food guide pyramid. This was
Yes.
informed by dietary recommendations. What about organizations and entities that receive federal funding, nursing homes, schools, you've all heard of Meatless Monday, and our military. When these guidelines are created, the entities that receive money from them must comply with these guidelines. The statement that nobody follows them is it's 100% false, as evidenced by what we see. Also, the foods, the when the food guide pyramid came out and fat was demonized, processed food companies made fat-free cookies, made margarine, made all of these processed foods that you buy in a grocery store. If someone says if someone says the dietary guidelines don't matter because nobody follows that, that's like saying a speed limit sign doesn't matter because no one follows the speed limit.
Yes. And the speed limit doesn't inform all these things like school lunches, hospital food, military food, SNAP program.
Right.
To say that it's wild. And I've seen other statistics. I'd like to get your take on this, is that kind of, you touched on it, is that since the 1980s when the dietary guidelines came out, the amount of American consumption of saturated fat, red meat, and dairy has gone down since the 1980s. Processed carbs went up because high carb, low fat was the mantra from the original antiquated food pyramid.
You make a really good point. Before the food guide pyramid, the average saturated fat intake was around 15%. The average saturated fat intake right now is around 11. 15 to 11, we have more heart disease. We are totally overweight, out of shape. 1/3 of our children are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. It's not a saturated fat issue. It is also wrong for me to say that saturated fat doesn't have an impact on blood lipids. And I was speaking to Kevin Mackey, who would be an incredible guest for your show, Dr. Kevin Mackey. He was former president of the Lipid Association. And we really spent a lot of time, spent an hour talking about this. The question becomes, is saturated fat overall a problem and what number? The guidelines, from my perspective, highlight that we need more research as to what actual number that is. Because if saturated fat was so detrimental, then that 10% rule wouldn't really hold up. And here's why. My husband, who you've met, runs, he used to be into marathons, and now that wasn't good enough for him, so now he's running ultras. Bananas.
He's intense.
He runs to like work and whatever. So when we were, by the way, I just want to tell you, when we were in Australia, I was so tired and so jet lagged. You'd already been there for a week. You were traveling. You're on vacation with your amazing family. I was totally JV. I did a turn and burn. I was exhausted. I didn't want to work out. And so I called him, and it was the equivalent to, I think it was like 3 a.m. because he was on call. And I called him. I'm like, what the F are you doing? And he was running. He was like running home from work. And he said to me, if you just set your standard based on circumstance, you're never going to uphold your end of the bargain. I was like, all right.
Dang, called you out.
He called me out. And the reason I say this is because he eats 4,000 calories a day. So if saturated fat was bad, and we believe 10% or less, then he's having 44 grams of saturated fat. I'm a small person, even though I train. My calorie consumption on a low volume training day might be 1,500. It's maybe a little bit more, whatever. But my saturated fat would be set at 14 grams, 15 grams. But if we believe that 10% saturated fat or more is dangerous for human health, then how is he healthy at 44 grams and I'm unhealthy at 15?
Yeah. I appreciate the wording that the dietary guidelines gave, that, like you had mentioned, which I don't believe it was ever done before, is that more research was done. They weren't demonizing it. They were just saying, hey, this is a limit. Now let's do better. Let's do more science around this. Because I think, we need that. And I think the bio-individuality topic when it comes to saturated fat and how different people metabolize different things from a genetic and epigenetic standpoints, very interesting. When I see people increasing saturated fat on labs, in the context of a whole food, nutrient dense diet, nine times out of 10, I don't see it really being negative at all. But I know people are slower metabolizers of it. People that have insulin resistance or gut issues may want to be mindful of the amount that they're consuming. And doesn't mean have no saturated fat. It's just diversify.
You make up this is a very sharp point, and here's why. Personalized nutrition is the way of the future. Let's
Yeah.
say somebody has elevated levels of LDL. LDL cholesterol, we know it's not just LDL. You're looking at various particle sizes, ApoB. There's a whole pattern and picture. If there's a certain amount of individuals with a genetic issues of, let's say, an LDL cholesterol over 190, let's say whatever percentage that is, maybe it's 10%. I was looking at some literature, maybe it's 30%, whatever the percentage it is. There's a group of people that those individuals have to pay attention to saturated fat. Alternatively, for individuals that have triglycerides over 200, and that might be 17% of the population, those individuals have to pay attention to carbohydrates.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, both nutritional plans have to match the health of skeletal muscle. And in this playbook, it is not by chance. I mean, the timing was extraordinary. So in this playbook, by the way, I just got this.
Looks
This
great.
playbook talks about how to implement the new guidelines. It's how to design a diet that has the guidelines in mind. And again, these guidelines in particular, I know 50% of the scientists on there, I know their work. These are legacy scientists. Legacy scientists. And it's really the first time that we have an opportunity to reframe Americans' health in such a powerful way.
Yeah.
It's the first time, and people, the next logical question is, well, how do I implement it? And I want to show you what we designed. And there are two committee members that wrote the protein portion, and Don Layman and Heather Leidy. And Don Layman co-authored the protein or the nutrition section of this book. Okay. So obviously, if you guys are watching this, you can see Will. And if you're not, but we designed a plate model. And
I
this is,
love that.
again, based on these guidelines and
So
based
it's a picture of a plate, and then are you showing people how to the
visualize it.
portions on the plate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you and I have been in practice for how long? I still see patients. I've been
Yeah.
seeing patients since 2006. I still see, it's 20 years later.
Yeah.
People struggle with how to implement it and what it should look like. And my
Yeah.
first book, Forever Strong, was all the nitty gritty and equations and
It was the why.
and yes, but you also have to understand when the rubber meets the road, what does it look like? And what is the practicality for someone who doesn't want to calculate? And then there has to be some level of freedom that people
Mm-hmm.
can go to a restaurant, not obsess over it, not worry about it. And so what we did is we divided this plate into three main parts. Protein, 1/3 is protein, and that's at the bottom. The rest is smart carbs, and these are the nutrient dense, high fiber, broccoli, beans, whatever. And then 1/3, if you're training, if you're exercising, will be rice, potatoes, pastas, like, if you eat a bean pasta, whatever it is, if you are training so that your carbohydrates are utilized. This is
Mm-hmm.
how you begin to think about designing a plate. And then we put a handful of other guidelines in here that make it extremely accessible for people to be able to act on. And this is the most important aspect of human health, is something that we all do. I mean, listen, I'm saying this in kind of extreme. Yes, we have to do resistance training, 100%. But food and eating is something that we all do. It's a non-negotiable. I mean, you have to do it. You
Yeah.
have to make choices. And one must understand that, of course, there are various ways to create a successful diet. Look, you wrote ketotarian, and I'm sure your nutrition habits have changed, and you're still here,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, like, we all have evolving nutrition habits. And then if you understand the science it doesn't have to be deep mechanistics. But if you understand foundational concepts, then you can take that into practice and implement it. And this playbook was really designed to be a tactical field manual.
Yeah. And it is. I want to break down like what a day in the life looks like. And because it is, when people hear kilograms and grams, like, okay, what does that even look like on a plate? So I want to break it down.
Yeah.
I want to move on from the dietary guidelines. Just one last question. As you mentioned, health should not be politicized, but yet people can't handle it. You've been so much a part of this conversation of elevating the hearts and minds of America. With you on stage at the announcement of the new dietary guidelines, are people shocked? Are people giving you pushback? Or what's your
I have no
thoughts
idea.
about this?
Didn't matter because it was, I mean, I've worked for 20 years talking about this. It could have been, I mean, it didn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. I'm
Yeah.
so proud of the fact that this happened. Um, that I don't care. It didn't even register. And listen, if those things had bothered me, I would not have worked so hard because I got to tell you what, criticisms, naysayers, you name it, I've felt it, right? Has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do. I was so proud, and I was so proud that they gave me the sign of the steak. I mean, it was awesome. It was so awesome, and it's not about me. None of this isn't even my win. I don't even I when you care about someone so much and you believe in them so much and you believe in the work that they do so much. My mentor, he was able, I mean, this is a 25-year friendship.
Mm-hmm.
I watched him write the guidelines.
Yeah.
Nothing, nothing could have, it was probably one of the best days of my life.
Yeah. I
Mm,
love how much you love him and celebrate him and just
I do.
revere him.
I do.
25 years in the
Yeah.
making, like you said, to see that come to fruition. What a blessing.
And listen, he's 74. I'm aware he's not going to be around forever. The
Yeah.
fact that something happened that I'm not sure ever was going to happen and that he was able to be a part of it um, is amazing. And,
Mm-hmm.
being on stage, again, it doesn't matter. They could have thrown tomatoes at me and I probably would have been like, oh, this one's ripe, this one's not. You know? Um,
Yes, yes. Well, I think this is good to hear people to hear the context and like the true meaning of this. It is about this work that you've been a part of for years. Okay, so let's go back to this plate. You said a third protein. Does it any protein? Can you break down for people that are newer to the protein conversation? Not all proteins are created equally as far as the amino acids, and I know you want that leucine threshold. What should we be looking at? And I know you recommend in the book maybe start with one meal, maybe breakfast.
yeah.
Let's harness that. So where do we start?
And by the way, I have tons of recipes in this book that are absolutely amazing. And I'm very proud because this is the book that I wanted to write. This is the book that I had always wanted to write. When I say it's just so easy and it has breakfast, you don't have to think about anything, and it doesn't take a long time to prepare. Spaghetti squash in a hole, one of my favorites. What about this one? The turkey, bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, also amazing. And again, I eat carbohydrates. Will knows this. I mean, I train. I love to train. I probably do 100 push-ups a day. And because I train so much, I'm able to have a lot of flexibility in my nutrition plan. And that is really my hope for people is that it's not about what you can't eat, it's what you can. And the way in which you do that is you become very dynamic in your movements. And I mean that from walking to doing whatever it is. And the first thing that everyone has to know is that protein is the most essential macronutrient. We hear protein, carbs, and fats. As you age, your protein need goes up. Most people don't realize that. The RDA, which is a totally irrelevant number, won't go there, is set at the minimum to prevent deficiencies. And that number was actually based on high quality proteins. So that number is based on, when we say high quality, I mean animal based products. There's no judgment here. I was vegan and vegetarian for many years. I don't know if you know that about me, Will. Did you know
I
that?
did know that. No, that's
Yeah.
shocking.
I I was vegan and vegetarian for many years, always searching to how could I become healthier? What did I need to do? And I was also, this might not be a surprise, was training at the time when I was in college. My hair started falling out. I became anemic. I didn't know how to do a vegan or vegetarian diet right. It's just my body, I wasn't into taking supplements. My nutrition wasn't able to support my overall health and my muscle health, which of course this led to this whole long journey. And so when I say protein and I make the distinction between high and low quality protein, this is by no means a personal attack, nor is it a moral judgment. It is none of those things. High quality protein is defined by the amino acid composition. There are 20 different aminos. The 20 different aminos are different in various amounts depending on the food. When you look at broccoli, broccoli has a certain amino acid composition. When you look at a steak, that has a certain amino acid composition. High quality proteins are the following: red meat, chicken, fish, whey, yogurt, eggs, anything from an animal-based derivative, because we are also animals. The amino acid profile, meaning the structure, the building blocks, the profile is the same profile necessary for human health. And I want to unpack that just a little bit further. If we think about muscle, in our own muscle, let's say it's made up of, I'm just making this up, 10 amino acids. This structure and muscle is the same as the structure and muscle in a fillet. And those amino acids in that fillet is what feeds our amino acids to keep this structure going. Plants also have amino acids and essential amino acids, but as one could imagine, it might have leaves and broccoli has little florets. The structure is different. The amino acid composition is different. Are all of them in there in, say, quinoa, which is my favorite example? Yes. But again, it's varying amounts. And the idea is, how do we, it's like if you have a circle, when you were little or your kids played with this circle and then they put the object in the circle versus the object in the square. Mm-hmm. You want to do what is easy and efficient from a calorie standpoint. And because our muscle is made up of these kinds of amino acids, it's much more efficient to match that with an animal-based amino acid profile, as opposed to having, say, 6 cups of a quinoa or 40% more of a certain plant-based protein. You can do it. You can design a healthy diet, a number of ways. Like I said, I was vegetarian. I think, Will, you were vegetarian for a long time too. You can design a healthy diet. It's not as easy, and it typically has more calories and more carbohydrates.
Yeah. And a lot of us in the space spent some years or time as vegetarians because we are interested in health sciences, experimentation, and what moves the needle. And it can work for a time for some people. But as you and I both found, it's like, okay, this isn't working. It's okay to pivot and evolve. That's part of being human. And when you know better, you do better. And it's just like, and again, I'm a pragmatist. I have telehealth patients that are vegans and vegetarians because of personal preference, ethical, religious reasons, convictions that they have. No judgment. Mm-hmm. I want to make the most nutrient dense, sound, gut friendly, protein forward, plant-based diet you can make. And you just have to be strategic around it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The other thing that I will say is you have to make decisions. You don't have to. One could make decisions any way that they want. I would encourage people to make evidence-informed decisions. Here's what I mean by this. I have spent years counterbalancing the argument that red meat is killing the planet and that if you care about your environment, that you shouldn't eat red meat. Just for example, when the reality is I've had many patients make decisions because they didn't want to contribute to what they anticipate as being hurtful for the environment. Mm-hmm. The reality is that the majority of greenhouse gas, for example, in the US comes 84% or more comes from electricity, transportation, and industry. Mm-hmm. 80% is coming from transportation, electricity, industry. We will never be able to eat our way out of greenhouse gas or global, whatever it is, whatever the repercussions are, agriculture is around 9%, collective, all agriculture. That's dairy, that's fruits and vegetables. A huge portion of that 9%, which is not very much, probably half of that is wasted. Fruits and vegetables that contribute to rotting, and 3.5% is maybe from animal, like from beef or
Yeah.
animal-based products. So
Right.
this is like a very long-winded way of saying this. Context is important, and with the velocity, you and I were in quote business, in the healthcare business, before there was this information overload, high velocity spread of opinions cloaked in fact, and it wasn't like that, my friend. Which is one of the reasons I always just love being able to talk and interact with you, is that it when people were wrong, the consequences weren't that big, because
Mm-hmm.
it didn't matter as much, because maybe it was obscure. But now, when statements
Mm-hmm.
are wrong and they are viral, the window of opportunity closes. And that's quite frankly why I became so passionate about doing this, is because I had just been finishing my fellowship at WashU in geriatrics and nutritional sciences. And I remember picking up Instagram, which I wasn't on it really at that time. And there was all this discussion about how red meat was like causing cancer, or red meat. Yeah, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, again, I was working at nursing homes on the weekend. This is my job. And the data didn't support that. And it was creating all of this fear. When you're younger, you can do whatever you want. I was vegan, vegetarian. You can be very flexible. But
Yeah.
when you're now getting into your 60s and 70s, and you're making decisions based on false information, and you're reducing high quality foods,
Mm-hmm.
this is where the problem comes in. And
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. So true. I was in my 20s again. And it's like you have more wiggle room to like beat your body up a little bit with maybe suboptimal choices. So, people still say this red meat equals cancer, colon cancer specifically. Where does that science come from?
I can't say for sure, but there was a major paper. So where did this science? I mean, I have my
Like
opinion.
the TMAO, like these compounds that can conflating causation and correlation.
Yeah. So Bradley Johnston, there was a series of papers in Annals of Internal Medicine. And for those of you who are listening, again, I don't care either way what anyone chooses. What I care about is that you have the right to choose, and that
Yeah.
you just put any biases or thoughts aside. And if you've already made up the decision, people will say, well, why don't you debate people online? And because science actually isn't done that way. You never, I would never try to change someone's mind who's already decided I'm wrong,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's not productive for anybody. And what I would say is that if you look at, people ask these questions. So an amazing scientist named Bradley Johnston, he's been on the podcast before. He put together a series of papers in Annals of Internal Medicine, which is like the Super Bowl. And what he found was that there was no increased risk in eating red meat and heart
Mm-hmm.
disease and cancer. It was, there wasn't an increased risk. And he didn't care what the answer was. He is just a really good evidence-based science person. And
Yeah.
he used something called, it was the grade. It is a grade process, which is what is used to look at pharmaceuticals. Anyway, it's not important. But the reality is, when he published that, it created such a stir. They tried to ruin his career.
Wow.
And in fact, they tried to stop it from being published. That in science, that is, it's not even heard of. And
Yeah.
again, I'm, you and I are friends, so it's hard because I want to tell you all these things. And I recognize that we are in a conversation where there are other people listening. And
They love it too.
I'm
I mean, they
painting
want to
this
listen in
picture.
on the convo.
I'm painting this picture because if you feel so strongly about something, just take a moment and ask why. Where does that come from? What is the evidence? Is this a person who I trust? And really just take a moment, because you and I are young-ish, young-ish,
Babies.
we're
I
babies.
mean,
But
mere babies.
again, my parents my mom, I don't want her to go online and then reduce her quality protein. I remember I was giving a talk in Denver, and this woman, she was 73, she came up to me, she goes, all I'm hearing is to go plant-based. And I looked at her and she was tiny. And you know me, I'm tiny. She's tinier than me.
Mm-hmm.
She must have been 4'11". And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, how much food do you eat? She's like, not much. Maybe I eat 1,000 calories a day. And I thought to myself, and I said, well, with 1,000 calories a day, if you then are going to decide to further reduce your animal consumption, how is she going to get her micronutrients? Vitamin
Mm-hmm.
B12, zinc, selenium, all of these iron, calcium. How is she going to meet her micronutrient recommendations? Again, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but these are all items that one who's listening to this have to take into consideration as you design a diet, because the diet that you design is going to inform your health, but also the legacy health of your children. Do you know that men, so sperm quality is something that is affected and impacted by metabolic health and diet? Same with egg quality. What we pass for our children, we want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can and
Mm-hmm.
that we are informed.
I can't tell you how many vegan telehealth patients that come in saying, no, this is my identity, this is how I eat, then evolve, and then they can still be mostly plant-based, but still, and especially when you focus on nutrient density, they can still be mostly plant-centric, but still get these high-quality animal proteins in. And it's when people feel better, it's this aha moment. It's like, oh, it's not a list of like you're a bad person one way or the other. It's just, no, I want to feel great more than I have this identity that I've sort of made this a religion for myself, or sometimes it is a religion, but you know what I mean, like an identity. Like their identity is plant-based,
Mhm.
vegan, vegetarian, and where I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to that. It's just like, what moves the needle for you? What moves the needle? What does the science show? What does the data show? And I want people to feel better.
Same, same. And I also want to mention something else. So in this playbook, again, now, Will, you know me. I am not someone is like, oh, I'm so proud of this. This is so great. This book is great. It's the book that I wish that I had written. I don't say that lightly. I'm not um, a proud person, but I think this could help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's what's the most meaningful. How do you design a diet? It also has charts in here, and by the way, it's very pretty, but it has charts
Love a
in
chart.
here and visuals.
What chart was that? What
This
were you
is the
showing us?
protein chart, and then this is, so if someone is more plant-based, it shows the amount of protein, so meats, would how many ounces you would need to meet a certain 30-gram threshold. And a lot of thought went into this book in terms of everything was very well thought out. And the other thing is, we wanted to make the science really easy to understand. And visually, we add in, he used to do comic books. So he's a men's health, he writes for men's and women's health, or he does these illustrations, but he used to do comic books.
That's
And
so
that's
cool.
why we designed it. And there's also a training program in here. Doesn't matter where you are in your training journey, how you can implement training. The other thing that makes this book so unique that I haven't seen in any of the books within our space is that it actually starts out with how to think.
Yeah, I saw that you put that in there. So, what's the connection between how we think and our health? What do you divulge?
First thing is you have to know what you stand for. There has to be an ethos. You have to know why you are doing what you are doing and what it really means to do it. Um, we have been conditioned for decades to be on autopilot, and we have been conditioned to reduce our stress and shy away from hard things. Um, and muscle is a choice. How you maintain muscle and what it does for metabolism is the only organ system you have voluntary control over, which means it doesn't have to be complicated. It does have to be strategic. There has to be a mandate for muscle. Muscle is the largest organ system in our body, and it's the lever that we can pull immediately. I'm going to give you an example. I know that you actually you meditate, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, which is amazing. I try to. I also pray before every meal. We pray with our family. We use all of these
Same.
tools and tactics.
Hmm.
However, if I am in fight or flight or I'm stressed, it takes a lot to get me there. Unfortunately, meditation doesn't really work. I usually fall asleep. Prayer doesn't usually work because my kids are so cute when they're doing it and they're like, they start fighting with each other because they have these memorized. It's very cute. You'll see when you come over. But you put me in a cold plunge, I'm done. I can't think of that was so effective to tear through any repetitive thinking. I have just leveraged my physical body to move my mind or a full out
Hmm.
sprint. Again, I'm not as skilled as you in meditation, and I could be meditating for 3 years before I'm able to even do that. But you put a physical stressor in there, and you've already
Hmm.
moved off the X.
Yeah. So we have to find that in for ourselves, like what is going to be an anchor for us in the present moment. And to be in full transparency, I suck at meditation too. I think we all we all suck at to some degree. But I hear what you're saying, though, 100%.
And what I put in this book is that, as I was putting this book together, think about all the books on the shelf. Think about all the books on someone's health and wellness shelf. And the reality is, why do we need more books? And we need more books because, well, number one, we're always evolving, but like, let's take that piece off. But there is a real disconnect between being informed, being interested, and then actually taking action, really meaningful action. There is a disconnect.
Hmm.
And I wanted to close that gap because I could provide, again, I'm still in clinical practice. I could provide people with the best. I could be like, here is the perfect plan. And if you are on autopilot, and if you are not discerning, and if you are not prepared for your own human weakness, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You will
Hmm.
forever fall back into the same habits and patterns. Very early on in my career, I saw this just fascinating through line of patients is that they were only willing to get as healthy as their self-worth. The patient
True.
that lost 40 pounds, doing great for 3 months, and then all of a sudden, 3 months after that, I'm like, what happened? And they
Yeah.
felt so uncomfortable with the level of worthiness, of being seen in that way, of having that health that they almost felt guilty.
Yeah.
And they put themselves back into a position where um, it was, I don't want to say sabotage because, of course, there's growth in that process. But if you are not very discerning and if you don't learn how to have a lot of emotional agility, we talk about physical agility, then you're forever going to be in this could have, should have, would have
Yeah.
habit. And so I really,
So true.
I
I
change.
love that you put the mind,
Yeah.
the mental health aspect of it, and how mental health is physical health. It's sort of a self fulfilling prophecy, one way or the other. You know, what I'm always saying is like you can't heal a body you hate. Like I love the way that you worded it. Like you can only heal as much as your self worth, because there is that sabotage. And like you said, that can be redeemed, and people can learn from that through their mistakes of like, what is this pattern? Where did this cycle come from? And kind of break out of it. Something that you talk about in the book that I wanted to touch on is this 24-hour muscle building cycle and how you break down the whole day. Super smart. Like what was the story behind that, and what is it for people that don't know?
We think about muscle. Okay, so muscle works in this 24-hour period. It has its own circadian rhythm. And as I was thinking about how do I help facilitate muscles, how do I be muscles PR agent? How do I redefine how we think about it? For a listener who hasn't seen me or doesn't know me, muscle is so skeletal muscle. There's smooth muscle, there's cardiac muscle, and there's skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, it makes up roughly 40% of your body weight. If you're jacked like Will, maybe it's 50%. But in that
You know,
that muscle
can't
tissue,
contain me.
it we think about it as it relates to performance for strength and mobility and power. However, that's one small aspect of muscle. Muscle is also the focal point for glucose disposal, how many carbohydrates that you can get rid of at rest. Healthy muscle burns primarily fatty acids, burns primarily fat at rest. It is your amino acid reservoir. If, so let's say I get sick and I'm in Australia and I got to call Will and I'm, just laying in bed because I have the flu, muscle is my body armor. And I'm not hungry, and it would pull from these amino acids that are already stored in skeletal muscle. Now, there's one other component to muscle. As an organ system, a few things happen. Number one, it is part of the 24-hour cycle, and it is affected by our sleep wake. Not the obvious moments where, when you're resting is when growth hormone happens and testosterone and the repair cycle, but also the 24-hour period when you are exposed to light, when you wake up, with the consistency of the way in which you interact with your environment also affect metabolism. This is a lot of words, so let me bring it back very simply. For all of my friends in medicine, my nurses, my doctors, my EMTs, 24-hour call. When I was in the hospital, I would do a 24-hour shift. It would be like Q3, the worst. Every 3 days, you're doing 24 hours. By the third 24-hour shift, I'm like in the back eating the graham crackers at the nurse's station. I'm exhausted. And when I would put a glucose monitor on, if I had exactly the same meal as I would when I was in my normal sleep-wake cycle, blood sugar was elevated. My resting glucose was just simply elevated because I was acting out of alignment with my 24-hour muscle clock. And again, I know that these are long-winded answers, but it's how do you then begin to structure a day from waking up to multiple movement actions throughout the day. I don't believe exercise is one discrete moment. We should live a very physically active life. I mean, you and I were on the plane. I guarantee you I had exercise bands, which I know I did. And I may or may not have even busted out push-ups for sure in the airport, but 100% potentially in the airplane because I don't wait for that 24 hours just for that one discrete training session.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I hope that I've answered your questions. There's so
You
much
did.
to say. Okay.
I love it. Yeah. And yes, you definitely were moving around on the plane more than me. You called me out on it. I was watching you from across the aisle. I was watching all the Lord of the Ring movies from Australia to San Francisco. But this is, I wanted to ask you this. Obviously, food is first, and you teach us what the meal looks like. You teach us how to move. You teach us about the mindset in the playbook. What's your thoughts on, a busy day, maybe they aren't getting in all their meals and is optimal, or they want to fill in the gaps. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
What's your take on essential amino acid supplements?
Okay. This is an important one because the reality is that also say hi, Will.
Hey.
The reality is that we get our meals perfect doesn't happen. And in fact, why having a good supplementation regimen and actually traveling with your supplements is really important, especially for protein and amino acids. So here is why. So you asked me, what are my thoughts on amino acids? Here's how I use amino acids, and I always travel with them. And I use Body Health. There's packets. You can use powdered packets between 1 to 3 packets. Here is why. Let's say I have 2 or 3 eggs. That's 18 grams of protein. I know, and the evidence would support 30 grams of protein at that first meal would be most ideal for me and practically anyone. If, like you and I were on a plane, I don't have access to that, or I could barely stomach whatever they're giving me on the plane, I'll have the 1 or 2 eggs, maybe 3, and then 1 or 2 packs of perfect aminos. What that does is it increases nutrient density in that first meal without extra calories, and for me is food volume. Again, as a small person, it's a lot for me to eat. Right off the bat, I'm set up for success because muscle is ready to be stimulated at that first meal. So that's an easy, very practical way to do it. The other way that I would suggest using essential aminos or perfect aminos is there's that first meal, and then also for recovery. Because what takes people out of the game is injury or soreness. Our muscles will outpace our tendons. So if you think about women and you think about someone who like hasn't been in the gym for a while, and I was going somewhere with this thinking frozen shoulder. One of the symptoms or signs and symptoms that we're seeing is a lot of muscle stiffness, but also immobility and frozen shoulder as an early sign of menopause. What happens when she starts training really hard and her muscles outpace her abilities of her tendons to be able to keep up with that increase in strength? Not ideal. And let's say her muscles are really sore. Dietary protein and or you're not going to eat, you might not be eating right after you train, essential amino acids can help with that recovery. So, I use it. I'm not sore. Don Layman, you and I were talking about Don Layman. This is something that we've been using for years to reduce soreness. And it's not about the soreness. It's really about the recovery.
Yeah, love it. I love perfect aminos too, body health. I take the tablets
Yeah.
wherever, like you mentioned, traveling. I always have a bottle of those tablets, perfect aminos, in my carry-on because it's just like I take 5. Like the serving size is 5. I take 6, and it's so convenient. It's so convenient where and it doesn't break a fast either, which is nice.
Here's what I will tell you about perfect aminos and essential amino acids right now, especially with the use of GLP-1s and the reduction in appetite in general as people age. This becomes a real game changer for the simple fact that total calorie consumption is down, total food consumption is down. And if you understand that protein is the most essential macronutrient, this is where essential amino acids come from, because I say protein, but it's not actually the protein that we need. It's the amino
It's the
acids that
amino
we
acids.
cannot make. And it is absolutely critical to get those because your body goes through 4 cycles of rebuild and repair every year. And as you age, your body becomes less efficient at doing this. And it's called anabolic resistance. When you become anabolically resistant, your more mature muscle, I cautiously say that because, who doesn't want to be 25 forever? But your muscles become resistant or less efficient at sensing proteins, sensing these amino acids. You can have older muscle respond like younger muscle simply by adding in essential amino acids, because this robust amount at one time really helps push the needle on improving anabolic resistance. And that, again, as we age, you need to stimulate muscle. If you have a meal with 12 grams of protein, you've done nothing for muscle.
Yeah. So good. This has been a blessing of a conversation, friend. Thanks for taking the time out. Before we go, the podcast, it's called The Art of Being Well. At the end, we have Your Art of Being Well. This is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's Art of Being Well. What's the most disgusting, nutrient-dense food that you do and you respect it for its health supportive benefits, but you're not doing it for the taste?
Oh man, I went to this place. Oh, it was so gross. I went to this place in New York City, and it had like organ meat. It was a super fancy blah blah, and it was called sweetbread. And so I'm looking on the menu. I'm like, I'll have sweetbread, and it was like pancreas.
Yeah, it is like pancreas, thymus, something like that.
So
Yeah.
gross, such a bad choice. Don't recommend it. Will, before I go, can I read you the
Yeah.
ethos, the Forever Strong
Yeah.
ethos?
Yeah. Get into it.
It'll be 2 seconds. So this ethos is a combined collective way of thinking about the world. It really defines culture. And so I wrote this at the beginning because this is how I think that we can all move forward. You ready? I would
Yeah.
never do this also if we were not friends, by the way. We're relaxed. Otherwise,
No, this is
my
this
arms
is
would
what
be
I
sweating and I would never
this
read this.
this is my dream interview. I just like catching up with you. It's fine. Get into it.
Okay. The Forever Strong ethos. Aging is inevitable. Muscle is the organ of longevity. Strength is not a luxury, but a responsibility. Through discipline, clear intention, and a collective path of growth, we choose to build bodies and minds that thrive under pressure. We train not just for performance, but for life. We do not shrink from adversity, we are sharpened by it. We lead with clarity, act with integrity. Strength is our choice and our standard. Resilience is our language. Contribution is our calling. We are forever strong.
Amen. People need to have that printed out on their fridge, in their gym, on their bathroom mirror. They need to.
Well, Will, you and I do a lot of work in the world. And while we talk about, and I've actually seen you evolve this as you've just been doing more and more. You and I, right now, we're talking about protein and we're talking about muscle. But what is the undercurrent of the conversation and what we're really doing is
Mm-hmm.
we're building better, stronger, more resilient people for our children, for generations, and that. And this is one reason why I love you, and I think that we have a really great connection, is because we're in it to build a better future and better people.
Yeah. Well, because when you're thriving, you can live the life you were created for. And I see so many people kept back from the things that God put on their hearts or their talents because they're not thriving. They're fatigued, they're foggy, they're inflamed, and that's what we're talking about. It shifts not only them, so they could be a blessing to the world, but their family dynamic, their friend circles. Like health can be viral when someone is thriving. It's infectious in the best of ways.
I totally agree. And I'm just so grateful. And by the way, if you're listening to this, I called Will and I'm like, Will, I have not done enough to support this book. Can you please help me? I would love to do a podcast. I would love to get this out to people. No hesitation. I got you. Let me fit it in. And here we are, Thursday afternoon, like 2 weeks before the book comes out. And I will
Of
not regret
course.
that, Will. And I am very, very grateful. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. So welcome. This book's going to change lives. It's going to change the world. I'm so excited for you. Do you have room for a couple more
Of course.
off the wall crazy questions?
Mhm.
What are two supplements maybe that we haven't talked today that are maybe lesser known that's in your house right now that you take that people should know about?
So there's two supplements that I absolutely love. The first one, and maybe your viewers or listeners know about this, but the first one is MitoPure, Timeline's MitoPure, urolithin A. I love the evidence behind it. I love the scientists behind it. Anurag Singh, who's been on my podcast,
Yeah,
they've
same.
done it right, and I really love the science. And so basically, urolithin A is a postbiotic. The majority of people cannot make it. It helps with mitochondrial function. I also anticipate seeing more and more research about how it helps with immune function. And again, various other items I think is
Hmm.
fully extraordinary. So that's one. And we dose that at around 1,000 milligrams per day. One could probably go higher, and I'm hoping that we're going to start to see that. My husband swears by it, won't run to work without it, which is also hilarious. The other supplement that I don't think is on people's radar is something called beta hydroxybutyrate. Beta
Mm.
hydroxybutyrate is just amazing. It's a form of a ketone that crosses the blood-brain barrier. I put some protocols in my book with it. I have no relationship to a company or there's no dynamic here. It is simply amazing. And I think that as we begin to think more and more about brain health and the connection, this is
Hmm.
it's my go-to. In fact, right after this, I'm about to go have some.
Yeah, I have the ketone IQ one shot. It's
I have
good.
a different
Uh,
company that, again, I have no financial relationship with. It's called Let's Go, and it's
okay.
liposomal. It's liposomal.
Oh, cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, amazing.
What's somewhere that you've traveled a lot this past year? Where's somewhere that you haven't been to that's on your bucket list?
My bedroom, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Are you watching TV, reading a book, doing
I'm just
nothing?
laying there. No one is talking to me. Someone has brought me coffee and the other person is rubbing my feet. And you know what they say? Instead of whining and crying and slamming doors, it's like, hey, mom, I brought you some flowers. Here's breakfast in bed. I would kill for that. I would kill for that. For
Yeah.
those that don't know, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and a husband who is in his second career as a surgeon. And that's my bucket list. 9 a.m. on a
I'm,
Saturday.
I am praying that over your life. Just a little siesta.
Like I could just
Uh,
see it. Someone brings me
yeah.
flowers, a tray, a fancy put together tray. I would
Yeah.
lose my mind. I would legitimately lose my mind.
What's the weirdest, most out of the box, unconventional thing you've done for your health that you're willing to admit on a podcast? Anything fringe?
It's not fringe, and I'm not proud of these habits, but I work. Um, Again, it is maybe a little fringe. I really like to challenge myself, and I really like to push myself in a way that probably might not be the healthiest. And so, let's say I don't have a lot of sleep. Let's say the night before I had 4 hours of sleep, and then the night before maybe it's something similar to that. I will always find ways to how do I accommodate for that. And for me, basically, this is counterintuitive, but there's some data to suggest that high intensity interval training after periods of sleep deprivation can be helpful. And so I've been kind of playing around with tactical naps and also high intensity interval training on very
Yeah.
sleep.
Or have you noticed any shifts, gains by doing it?
No, but definitely more caffeine in the afternoon helps. I'm just being honest here. I mean,
Report back. Report back.
I'll have to report back. And it doesn't help because I'm married to a machine, right? This guy
Yeah.
is like, it's working
I
100.
mean, the whole family's a machine. I mean, the videos that I see you sent me with your kids working out, it's
Well,
like
my son is
wild.
training for the SEAL teams.
Yes.
He's 4.
He's
He's 4.
toddlers in the Navy SEALs. It will be your kids.
He's training for the SEAL teams.
Yeah, wow.
So I
How did that
cannot,
go down?
well, my husband's a SEAL. My husband was a SEAL for 10 years, which I don't know if you know that. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Okay.
Yes.
My husband was a SEAL for 10 years. We have a lot of military-esque around us, right? That's kind of how it rolls. But we had dinner with Jocko. So we've seen Jocko over a period of a couple months, and he's 4. So we saw Jocko when he was 6 months ago, and then we saw him again. And so each time, and then we see like Remy Adeleke and these guys that are, he doesn't care that his dad's a Navy SEAL. I say that, but it's really funny, but he does. He's sitting there and this kid is on the path. So I come down. I'm telling you, and you and I could probably have a whole other podcast on this, which we should. Is it nature or is it nurture? Are they born with certain attributes? These children, they are God's gift, and they're born with their own they're born in their own path in their own way. And my son, I came down the other day, and it was 8 p.m. and it's bedtime. So bedtime is 8 o'clock, and he's doing sprints in his underwear and his gym shoes. And I'll send you this video with a Christmas shirt on, and he has a mullet. And this is like, it's on a woodway. So it's on the self starter, and he's just cranking out. And then he gets off and he does some push ups, and he goes back on. I'm like, Leonidas. So his name is Leonidas. He's named after the Spartan king. What are you doing? He's like, Mom, got to get my training in. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL, so I got to get strong. Got to be stronger than Daddy. It's 8 p.m. at night,
Yeah.
and I watch
That's
the video,
so cool.
and he cold plunges. And it's, what are you going to say no to a toddler? He's like, hey, Mom, hey, guys, you want a cold plunge? And both Shane and I are like, hard pass. No. You can't say no to a 4-year-old.
It's so cute.
It's all
I mean,
nature.
it's large. Yeah, it is such a combination, right? But it just shows you the power of nurture, though, too. I mean, because you've fostered that amazing nature, right? As it can bloom, it's like fertile soil for the seed.
The other thing, which I think you'll really appreciate, and also your kids are amazing. The one thing that we do is we really try to cultivate this ability to, we tell them, and since they've been little, I am strong, I am kind, I am courageous, I am worthy, and I am loved. And we also really facilitate a decreased level of friction with hard things, meaning we teach our children that they should expect things to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we allow them to figure it out and struggle a little bit to be able to overcome that. And what has been so extraordinary is that, you know, as a parent, you kind of step back and you watch. My son, he taught himself how to swim. He expected it to be hard. He failed and failed. I mean, it was like so terrifying. I would sit in the pool and stand there. He's like, Mom, I got it. And he would go in and then he would like go underwater and I'm freaking out and I would pull him out. And he's like, again, again. And most kids would be totally traumatized by teaching themselves to swim that way. But he wanted nothing to do with me helping him. He wanted to teach himself and then he
Yeah.
wanted to practice it. And, you know, if we weren't raised that way, or perhaps that wasn't cultivated for us personally, because I know for many people it wasn't, we
Mm-hmm.
have an opportunity to shift off of autopilot and become very discerning of how we think about things that then inform the next right action. And that is a skill, and the ability to be emotionally agile and embrace discomfort and seek out friction can be very transformative for people.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important in our society. Grit, resilience. Just it's so like you said, not just for kids, but all of us that live in this comfortable world. For most of us, my friend, this has been a blessing. Where do people go to get the book, get plugged into all your other work,
Yes.
all the things?
If this, so if you are listening and viewing this interview and you have not gotten the book, you can go to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon /Playbook. We have a whole bunch of free bonuses and other kinds of items that you can get. And you can also get it on Amazon, wherever books are sold. You can find me on my podcast, The Dr. Gabrielle Lyon Show, Instagram at Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, our medical practice, Strong Medical, YouTube, newsletter. Did I miss it? Saturday
No.
morning at 9 o'clock in bed. Not yet.
Getting those roses delivered.
Oh my gosh, I die.
My friend, love ya. Thanks for coming on.
Love you. This was so fun. What a great way to spend a Thursday afternoon.
Thanks, friend.